Good morning, Oklahoma. I'm Curtis here and welcome to SUNUP. Well, it's a special week here at OSU as hundreds of 4-H'ers have overtaken the campus for the 103rd 4-H Roundup. We'll have more on that later on the show, but first, SUNUP's Elizabeth Hokiv catches up with Dr. Josh Lofton to find out how the corn crop is coming along.
We're here now with Josh Lofton, our cropping systems specialist. So Josh, August is right around the corner and August typically means corn harvest. How are we looking on that timeline?
Well, we're looking okay. We have a big stretch of corn that we can talk about. We'll probably start corn harvest sometime in August. Our really early planted corn is looking pretty good. I got an ear here from our early planted corn, so we have kind of finished out the corn. We have gone through dent layer. If you kind of see here, usually by the time we get to dent, which is what everybody likes to, those little dents at the top of the corn here, then we can actually look at the individual kernels themselves. And what we do is we look at a milk line. And typically from the top of the kernel all the way to the bottom, it takes about 4 weeks to dry down that crop. And we're about 25% milk line. So in about 3 weeks, we'll probably be at maturity for our corn. And then we're just relying on Mother Nature to dry us down on the crop. So if we got planted real early, we are probably maybe a little bit closer to half, 3/4, maybe even at physiological maturity. And we're on that dry down, but we're probably in this milk line stage for a bulk majority of our early corn. So 1st of August, we should be mature, and then a couple weeks beyond that, we'll probably start to see combines rolling through the field, getting corn into the bin. And really and truly, I think this early season crop is looking pretty good. This has been a unique year. We've basically, because of the rainfall patterns and where we've got rain, where we didn't get rain, where it was too wet, where it was too dry, we've been planting corn very consistently all the way through the summer. So early stuff looks pretty good, especially areas that caught rain. The later stuff that got planted into April and into May, maybe not so good. And we got some later planted corn behind us that looks really good, but has got a lot of season in front of it.
Yeah, so talking about moisture, we've had kind of a crazy summer in terms of the weather. We just got a lot of rain. How has that been affecting the corn? Is there anything that's doing? Yeah,
and I think that's really altered how the corn looks at every planting time. In our really early stuff, we caught most of us caught some really nice rains that has filled out the crop nicely. However, we are starting to see kind of some late season disease start popping in. And when we talk about really late season disease, we talk about this aspergillus or A. flavus. It is this olive green kind of powdery material we see on corn. We get this in Oklahoma quite a bit because when we talk about moisture early and then starting to dry up, that's typically that environmental pattern that leads to A. flavus. Now, a lot of growers might start looking at this and really start worrying about aflatoxin because that's the chemical that's associated with this aspergillus fungus. But I do want to say that aflatoxin is not 100%. Just because we have this A. flavus or this dark green powder doesn't mean we're always going to have aflatoxin. In fact, we don't always have to have this A. flavus very evident to get aflatoxin. So it's really, while they are associated, they shouldn't just be said if one's there, then the other one will be there.
With these hot and dry conditions that we've been having, is there any other things that producers might be concerned about with the corn?
Yeah, so some of this later planted corn, even some of the later early planted corn, but especially that corn that maybe got planted into April and into May, is going to be pollination. If we go through that tasseling and silking period during really hot times of the year, we're talking to where our daytimes are into the 90s or into the hundreds, and our nighttime temperatures are at least into the mid 80s, if not into the 90s. And especially true if we have really low humidity. That's when we get into issues of poor pollination. And when we get poor pollination, even though the crop might look good, the ear might have good resources, we just don't have the kernels to kind of put those resources into. So that is a concern for some of that later planted corn is, did we get proper pollination, and is that going to have those resources to fill that? This crop is doing really well. We're at V6. We have a nice established crop. We have a good amount of leaf development. We're starting to hit those really critical times, that V6 period, to where we're really starting to put in resources towards ear development and tassel development. So it looks really good, but there's a long season ahead of this. This probably won't get harvested until close to Christmas or maybe even into the new year. So we still got a lot to talk about on this later planted corn, but it's looking good right now.
If there are producers who have planted some late corn, is there anything that they should be watching out for?
That's a great question, because with this late corn often comes rust. If you're on the southern half of the state, you're really starting to think about rust by the time we start to see tassels come out. And sometimes, depending on the load of that rust or the amount of disease that we have out and around, that could be a 1 to maybe even a 2 applications for southern rust is what we're talking about here. In the north central part, so this northern, it gets a lot less and less likely and a lot less and less impactful, but in a year that has the right conditions, we can see rust come in pretty early in that reproductive cycle, and we will have to apply. So late season diseases, especially as we really start spiking that humidity in August, and as things start to cool down, we could see southern rust come into that. And any producer that is planting kind of past that middle of June really has to be looking into southern rust as their main yield limiting factor here.
Yeah, well, we'll hope to see some good yields.
Yep.
Josh Lofton, Cropping Systems Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Wes Lee here with the Mesonet Weather Report. All in all, we have had a pretty decent year for rainfall so far. To help determine the weather of Oklahoma, the state is divided into 9 different climate regions. Here is a 7-day rainfall from Tuesday showing that almost every climate region received something. There were good amounts in the Panhandle, across to the northeast, and down into the southeast region. It was mostly the southwest region missing out this time. Often it is not how much rain you get, but when you get it that is important. A good way to look at this is with our cumulative rainfall graphs. Looking at the entire state so far, you see we are right on track for this year. The dark line as compared to the long-term average, the blue field. We were a little wetter than normal for January and February, then pretty normal for March and early April, falling a little behind in late April but catching back up in May. But let's quickly look at the 9 different climate regions and see how each of these compares. Starting with the Panhandle region, we see that they are actually ahead of schedule now, but they did have a pretty dry period in the late spring. It took a 3-inch plus rain in mid-June to get back above the long-term average. The North Central is next, showing much of the time running below normal due to a dry spring, but has since caught up now to about where they should be. The next region, the Northeast, is slightly behind normal at the end, but has tracked pretty close to normal for most of the year. The West Central is one of our driest regions today, falling about 3 inches behind the long-term average even after starting the spring out in pretty good shape. The Central region is similar, also being behind but only by a couple of inches. This is mostly due to limited rainfall in the past couple of months. The East Central has run pretty tight to the long-term average all year, currently being just a tad below normal. The Southwest is often our driest region of the state. This year, they have been our wettest region over the first 6 months, finishing just slightly below normal. The South Central is one of the wettest this year, right on track for the first 4 months, followed by a really wet May. However, they have missed out on most of the latest few rains. The 9th and last district, the Southeast, has had a pretty good year so far. Rains have tracked very close to the long-term average and finished just slightly above normal. Overall, not that bad so far. However, it should be noted that the upcoming La Niña could mean drier conditions in the fall and winter months. Gary is at the beach this week, but will return next week for another edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Well, we're joined here by our new livestock entomologist, Dr. Jonathan Kamak. So Jonathan, before we hop in to see what's happening in the insect world, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I started my position with OSU and the Extension Service back at the end of January. And previous to that, I was with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in the Pesticide Safety Education Program.
Yeah, well, let's just jump right in. You know, it's mid-July, right in the dog days of summer. So what's the tick situation going on right now?
Right now we don't have to really worry about too much with the adult ticks. You know, usually a lot of the times that's what people are worried about because they're the kind of bigger ones that are more visible. But what we do have to worry about are those little ones that we can't really see too well, particularly the nymphs and the larvae of Lone Star ticks. We're kind of right in the thick of the season right now when those are starting to become pretty numerous in the environment. So we need to take precautions to protect ourselves from getting bit by those.
And around here we refer to those as seed ticks, right?
Right, seed ticks, that's going to be those little tiny immature ticks that are like about the size of a seed, kind of how their name suggests, and they typically just walk up to the top of some grass or a bush or something and they stand there with their front legs up in the air, kind of wave around like this, waiting for a host to walk by. And oftentimes we're unlucky enough to be that host for those immature ticks, and you'll walk by and end up with, you know, potentially hundreds of them on you, using your body as their you know, one of their early blood meals.
And that's really concerning because Lone Star ticks carry alpha-gal syndrome, right?
Correct. Well, maybe not necessarily carry it, but they're implicated in how we get it. So we don't quite know the association and kind of the biological side of it. It's not a true pathogen or a disease like a lot of things that ticks can vector, but there is an interaction between some proteins in their saliva and our body that causes us to then become allergic to red meat.
And this is just really important this time of year because a lot of producers are out, you know, checking on their animals, and so it's just a really good reminder to wear, you know, repellent if you have it.
Right. If you have, you know, genes that you can treat with a permethrin, a synthetic pyrethroid, that works really well to not only repel the ticks but also kill any of them that might try to crawl up your pants. If you do decide to treat your clothing with the synthetic pyrethroid, make sure you follow the instructions on that label, and it's going to tell you to treat your clothing while you're not wearing them. So it's best to have the pair of pants that you want to be treated. You lay them out on a flat surface, spray them really well with that material, let it dry. It's going to take probably 12 to 24 hours, and then you can wear those pants you know, while you're out working with your animals. And then after you are outside, either working with your animals or even just for, you know, kind of fun and you know enjoying the outdoors right now, make sure that you conduct a tick check to make sure that you don't have any you know, present on your body and trying to blood feed.
So shifting to livestock, is there really much of a concern this time of year when it comes to ticks?
Right, they're going to be on the animals, right? That's just something that we can't really do anything about. So keep an eye on the animals. If you do see large numbers, you know, you could treat the animals with, you know, just kind of a general insecticide such as a pyrethroid. It will help with control a little bit, but you know, other than that, there's not much we can do. Dewormers will have a little bit of an effect on them, but most producers aren't really deworming at this point in the year.
Yeah,
that was typically a springtime event.
Yeah, and it's just mainly just us that we need to be concerned with. All right, well, what about horn flies? I mean, this is the time of year that you can just look out and just cattle are covered with them, so I imagine that is definitely an issue.
Yeah, it's 100% is impacting the animals. We're, like you indicated, we're getting kind of into that kind of the early on peak where we start to see hornfly numbers really start to increase between now and maybe August and September. So if you haven't implemented any sort of control program yet or management program for those, you know, it's time. And whether that is using an ear tag on the animals that's got the insecticides in it that will help repel the horn flies, or even using a feed-through product that you can either buy as a mineral supplement or mix in with feed that the animals will ingest, and it passes through in the manure, and it will help control the larvae that are developing in, or eventually developing in that manure.
What about horseflies?
Yeah, horseflies are also out there. You know, a summertime problem as well. They're basically flying around in the environment, landing on the animals, biting them, getting a blood meal, and flying off. So they're very difficult to control because they spend so little time actually on the animal. One of the best things that we can do to reduce horsefly numbers would be to kind of manage things in the environment. And what we know is that areas that have high amounts of eastern red cedar also have much larger populations of horseflies. So maybe not something you want to tackle in the heat of summer, but definitely as things start to cool off, maybe implementing some cedar management as well.
And that's a really big concern because horseflies are one of the main vectors for anaplasma, right?
Right. They, just like when we're vaccinating the animals, we have to keep in mind, not reusing needles between animals to prevent spreading anaplasma through a herd. It's essentially the same thing with the horseflies. They're flying around out in the environment. They'll land on the back of the animal. Their mouth parts are kind of like a pair of scissors. So they'll cut the animal and then drink that pool of blood up. And then if that animal is infected with anaplasma, then they're essentially flying around with a pair of contaminated scissors stuck to the front of their head, and the next animals they land on and bite could become infected.
And of course, if producers have any questions, they can always contact their local county extension office and even give you a shout if they just have any questions, right?
Definitely, that's why we're here.
Alrighty, thanks, Jonathan. Dr. Jonathan Kamak, OSU Extension livestock entomologist here at Oklahoma State University. .4-H State Roundup is a great time of year because it brings these model students here to OSU to model students who have really worked really hard, and they get to hey!
So right now the entire state is in a district competition. They decorate the sidewalk. It's a chalk decorating contest based off of our theme this year. So we try to get all the district officers to come up with their own picture and their own design, and they get other delegates from their counties to come pitch in.
Roundup to me is a good time to get with friends and a good time to explore the campus for people who want to come here maybe in the future. I want to come here maybe in the future someday. It's really fun to communicate and get to know new people, and just helps bring people together, really.
4-H has definitely helped me a lot with my mental health, and I've built a lot of new friendships and good friendships that are probably going to last me lifelong.
They get to experience a variety of workshops throughout their 2.5-day experience here based on what they want. They're not pre-designed workshops that we want them to go to. It's based on their passion, their loves, and their desires.
Later, I'm going to do a OSU athletic facility tour, and then also a martial arts class, and after that we're probably just going to hang out in our dorms. I'm most excited about the athletic facility tour because I personally do swim, and hopefully I can see their lap pool and stuff, and maybe I can get a scholarship for swim.
I've been in 4-H for as long as I can remember, and it's just OSU's been 4-H, that's all I've known, but so coming to Roundup and knowing the campus already kind of helped me decide maybe I do want to go to OSU.
Just the opportunity to be in Stillwater for 2.5 days, to be a mini college kid, walk around campus, to get to know the university, just really is an overall, just an outstanding experience for Oklahoma 4-H.
This is my first, and I have loved it so far, and I would definitely come back next year.
Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week's topic is the proper storage of big round bales of hay. We've addressed this before on Cow-Calf Corner, but it's that time of year when we're baling hay, we've got hay to take off of meadows and actually get it somewhere into storage, and we want to think about a few things that we know are going to pay dividends and minimize the spoilage of those big rounds up until the point that we actually are going to be feeding that hay. We can take for granted things like a lot of rainfall, high relative humidity, lack of wind flow are all going to lead to more spoilage of big round bales. All those things work against us. We know that a twine wrap bale is subject to a lot more spoilage over time than a net wrap bale. So net wrapping is preferred if we can. So first of all, in a perfect world, if we had ample barn space to store big rounds, we're going to do the most we could to possibly minimize the spoilage in those bales over time. There's a lot of data that shows us that big rounds stored inside an enclosed barn, unlike this one, actually have as little as 2% spoilage for up to 9 months to a year. But that's not always practical. It takes a lot of space to store big rounds. This would be a nice situation to have, but in reality, we typically find ourselves storing those bales outside. So a few things we want to keep in mind. First, pick a site to store that hay. Elevation is important. The higher ground we can get to, the more drainage we're going to have. We don't want a lot of shade. We want a lot of airflow in order to keep that site dry where we're going to be storing those bales. As we take a look at some of the pitfalls we might have, just right behind me, we've got some bales that are stored. They've been here for a while, but we can see that bales that have deteriorated to the point that the net wrap's not in good shape. We may potentially not even be able to pick those up and get them to the site we want to feed them. And some observations we can make, those are actually bales that are stored in an east-west orientation, and they're stored really close together. So first thing to keep in mind, when we build our rows and we're storing outside, we want to store in a north-south fashion, and we want to keep about 3 foot between the rows of hay. We want those bales stacked butt to butt as tight as we can to minimize the amount of precipitation that's going to get in there, maximize the airflow between the rows of hay, and permit the sun over the course of a day to actually shine down those rows. Now, if we can minimize the amount of grass or vegetation in that row by mowing or herbicides, something like that, that's also going to work to our advantage. Another thing, if possible, when we store in that north-south orientation, 3 foot apart, if we have old pallets, old posts, the potential to put down some really coarse ground rock or limestone underneath it at a high elevation, good wind flow, we do more to facilitate drainage, but anything we can do to keep that hay off the ground, minimize moisture getting into the bottom of it, is going to maximize the amount of real hay or forage we have to feed at some point down the road. Other things to keep in mind, if possible, it is possible to find some kind of cover to put over rows of hay once they're stored. If we can do that on a cost-effective basis, that's going to work to our advantage in terms of minimizing spoilage also. And one of the few things that is a positive about drought that I always point out when we talk about this, drought comes with the upside that whatever forage we're storing in the form of harvested big bales, we do reduce the amount of spoilage in those bales when there's less precipitation on them. But anything we can do to increase the amount of hay we've got to feed later should be looked at on a cost to benefit ratio. We want to be practical. We want to lead to things that are profitable. We want to take into account how long that hay is going to be stored before we actually are going to be feeding it. Hope this helps, and I hope your hay crop is going well and you're getting a lot of bang for your buck on the amount of bales you're making this year. As always, I hope this helps, and thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner.
Finally today, SUNUP's intern Jamie Driscoll shows us how even the most seasoned ag instructor needs a little bit of instructing.
So you guys are going to go behind.
So we're hosting 24 teachers from across the country through the Curriculum for Agricultural Science Education, or CASE, for animal science. So they're high school agriculture teachers that are here for a week to learn more about animal science and to be able to integrate that in the classroom. So they're working to learn hands-on lab activities and be able to implement those when they return to their students.
Everybody to get goggles on.
So we've been hosting these the past 2 years. We normally do 2 each summer. And so we did 2 last year, and we've offered 2 this year. The first one was in June and really focused on agricultural mechanics. And the second one we're hosting is now in July, and we're focusing on animal science. So the 2 lead teachers are actually provided to us from CASE. And so they're both current in-service teachers. They're both high school agriculture teachers that are not only certified in this curriculum and teach it in their classrooms, but they've also been trained to be teacher facilitators. And so one of them is from Kansas and the other one is from New York. And they come here and spend the week to be able to actually do the training. So for us here at OSU, we really help facilitate the process, help provide the materials and equipment that is needed, the facilities, and then we also offer some coursework associated with it that is offered for graduate credit if the teachers are interested.
As a lead teacher, it is my opportunity to come to the different institutes and actually lead the participants throughout the institute. So I was actually chosen by CASE, by Curriculum for Agricultural Science Education, to actually be one of the teachers of teachers. So I didn't necessarily volunteer, I just really was given the opportunity to teach.
I'm here for CASE curriculum training. My goal really is to get good teacher resources as well as meeting other ag teachers to see what they do in their classroom. So I'm already like trying to plan my whole year and integrating like what I teach and like what my passions are with the CASE curriculum.
In my personal classroom, I believe that CASE is going to be able to strengthen my ability to teach more hands-on activities within my classrooms to allow my students to engage more heavily and rely more on the science portion of agriculture.
I highly recommend CASE, or Curriculum for Agricultural Science Education, to just about any agricultural educator out there. CASE really does provide unique experiences for students, but it also gives teachers the skills, knowledge, and competence to walk into their classroom and implement the curriculum successfully. That's the neat part about the curriculum model with CASE, is that as an educator, you actually have to perform the labs, the activities, projects, and problems, and it gives you a different confidence than if you just kind of pick up a curriculum and hope for the best. So I highly recommend it to just about any teacher who's willing to immerse themselves in a really unique professional development experience.
And that about wraps it up for us today. Now remember, if you saw something on the show you liked, you can always visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu, or follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Curtis Hare, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.